Certainly good to be with you tonight and have the opportunity to speak to you for a few moments about our work that Paula and I just kind of recently became involved in, August of last year, as a matter of fact. So we're still kind of, you might say, kind of on a learning curve ourselves. But the work is a great work that's been going on for many, many years. Brother Ned Martin has been faithfully supporting it for I don't know how long, a long time, back in at least the 80s. So we certainly appreciate his faithful support. And without the support of many congregations and individuals, then everything I'm fixing to tell you, of course, could not ever have been done. And so the work that's been done by the church for so many years and so others that helped them was not due just for them alone, obviously, but by the cooperation of everybody who's involved in it. And we need to always keep that in mind because whoever gave the money to enable them to do it, and of course, without them, then nothing would have ever been done. And so here tonight to kind of talk to you about the work and maybe hopefully give you a little better idea of what is involved in it. Here's a map of the world. Now India is a country they've kind of started in to begin with, I guess. Pakistan where they started. India is that one little country right there. Now obviously you can tell compared to the rest of the world, India is a relatively small country, and yet in that country lives over 1 billion people. That's nearly 4 times the population of the United States. If you multiply that by the country right around India, of course in China, then in one region, Asia, you'll reach very quickly about half the world's population. So that's where all the world's population lives in. We think the United States is the center of the world. It's not. The center of the world right over there. That's where most of the people are. And of course, that's also where many places the church is the weakest, especially in China. But in China, it looks like beginning to open up just a little bit. So we need to be prepared because one day China may open up. And just like the Soviet Union did, about 10, 20 years ago. And so we need to be prepared and have people ready to go. And there are people now in the countries surrounding China, that are Christians and that are preparing themselves. And so if they're able to go in, of course some are doing it now, kind of through the back door, but once they are able to go, then we can rest assured there are going to be multitudes of people who are ready to go in there and start evangelizing China, which they desperately need. But of course you're talking about a whole lot of people, and so it's going to need a lot of evangelizing. But anyway, in that region, that shows the world and how many people we're talking about in that region. J.C. and Betty became, of course, missionaries to that region back in the mid-'60s. And they've been faithfully working in that region for many, many years. And, of course, J.C. recently passed away back in February, and due to his illness, it was needed that someone come and kind of pick up the slack. And so they asked us to do it, and Lewis and Bonnie Rushmore, which mentioned at the end, they also came down. So together then we're working to kind of keep the work going after his passing, which all of us is one day will, and so we need to be prepared for that too. And so I like to summarize the work by saying this. It all boils down to preparing the natives of the country to do the evangelizing of their own country themselves. They can do it far better than we can. They know the language, they know the culture, they can live there very freely and easily. And so there's no culture shock to them. It's nothing at all. And so they can do it far better than we can. But of course, in order for them to evangelize their own nation, they need certain tools, the same tools that we have here. One is, of course, education. We all recognize the need for good biblical education of our church leaders and preachers here. And here we have all kinds of schools that we can go to to give you that education. We have the money to go to school. We have the cars to get you to schools and all those things. We have everything that we need. But in other countries, of course, that situation is far different. And so through cooperation of several others who work with the church, and several preacher training schools or Bible schools have been established in India, country of Myanmar or Myanmar, Malaysia, Philippines, and Borneo, and of course several in India, like I mentioned. We're also maybe next spring going to work with James Jones and Restoration Radio to help him set up one in Malawi, there in Africa. So we're always looking for opportunities that we can set up these kind of schools. And so we'll be going about twice a year then to preach and teach in the Bible training schools. Here's a picture of one school that we were able to teach in for a couple of days, run by Roger Nigan. The preacher school itself is supported by a church in Texas, but we support him personally with his radio and TV work and his literature work. And so while we were there, then we had the opportunity to speak to his students and also some past graduates of the school for a couple of days about some of the very practical aspects of preaching and that sort of thing. And so I tried to do that at least, and I hope the lessons were well received. I think they were. Here's in Bangalore, India, working with P.R. Swami. This is a preacher's seminar, we call it. And these preachers were all converted initially as a result of a radio broadcast, which we'll mention here in a few moments. But now they're, of course, preaching, and now they're teaching others and bringing others to Christ. And so the purpose of this was basically twofold: to teach and encourage the preachers themselves, and then also, of course, to teach and encourage their contacts to render final obedience to Christ. P.R. Swami likes this concept very well, and it works apparently, because 12 people were baptized this day, and 2 were baptized the next day before it was over with. There's a picture of myself teaching there, and P.R. Swami doing the translating for me. I would say around 100 people gathered there on that occasion for that one-day seminar. Then we're going back to Rajanagan and Kangayam again. I went by a slide too quickly there. But we had a school there. Paula also taught a ladies class, and this is a picture of all the ladies that was gathered there on that occasion. This was the largest group that Paula talked to while she was there. It was also the first time she talked through an interpreter, which she would prefer to start with a smaller group, but you don't always get what you want. And so she had to start with the largest one. But anyway, you see that indeed a well-received crowd there. Then we moved over to Kakinada with Joshua and Ricky Gudum. That is Joshua's son, Ricky. He's sitting right there in the very front row. He graduated from Freed-Hardeman. He also got his master's degree from Oklahoma Christian a few years ago. And he's working faithfully with his father now. And this is a preacher's seminar, or preacher's luncheon that they called it. Quite a bit different from a preacher's luncheon that I'm familiar with. Most of the time in the preacher's luncheons that I'm familiar with here in the States, basically all we do is get together and eat, and we talk for a little while. But there in this country, they don't do that. When they get together, they eat a little bit, of course, but their main function is not just to eat, but their main function is to get together and work and encourage one another. And so he's told me that their typical schedule would be to have speakers more in the morning, and then afternoon, after lunch, then they go out and knock on doors and try to talk to others about Christ. And that would they encourage the church that's in that particular village. So certainly that is a much better way to use your time than what we often do here. But I think it does illustrate their desire and conviction to spread the gospel. Now, I was there on this occasion, and that concept did not follow. They did not go out in the afternoon and knock on doors. So they had speakers morning and in the afternoon. So they spent all day long listening to speakers and being encouraged there. About 150 preachers gathered together on that occasion. And so not only do we have the preacher training schools, but we oftentimes might just talk to the preachers or church leaders and that sort of thing during the day. Maybe have meetings at night then. Primarily working with the churches and Christians that's already there, strengthening and encouraging them to do the things that they need to do. We also just started something which I'm extremely excited about, and that's called the JC School of Evangelism. This is in the city of Madurai, which is in the very southern tip of India, run by Philemon Raja. And the purpose of this, of course, is not a Bible training school or a preacher training school, but simply a school of evangelism, as the name implies. To teach and train and motivate the ordinary Christian to go out and spread the gospel to their fellow man wherever they might have the opportunity. You know, that's how the early church grew so fast. The early church grew tremendously, as we all know, not because the 12 apostles were such great preachers, but because every member went out and they talked to their neighbor and preached the gospel wherever they might be found. And so that's the purpose of this school. We want to give them some practical advice and ways of teaching. Also give us some biblical basis and strong biblical background about the Bible, how to read the Bible and understand it, some background about the other doctrines and other beliefs and how to talk to them and that sort of thing. And so the purpose is about 1 week a month. Then the people will come in and they will learn, sit at the feet for all day long, and then go out in the next weeks until next come back together again and talk. There's already bearing results just about every month when Philemon, we get reports from Philemon. He said that because of the efforts of the people who's already been coming to school there, then they usually have 1 or 2 or 3 baptisms in that time. I reported one as yesterday, I think it was, matter of fact. He called last night about 2:30 in the morning. Of course, it's daytime over there where he was, but it's nighttime to us. But that's hard for them to get that straight sometimes. But anyway, so he reported one baptism last night, so he was excited about that. And of course, we want to hear reports like that too. That's what it's all about. Well, we're going backwards here now. All right, does that. There we go. Now we're going back the right direction. Okay, that's the church building where the school is being held at. You see them sitting on the floor, which is quite common there in India. And they would sit there on the floor just like that for 3 or 4 hours at a time with just a couple of short breaks. I don't see how they're able to do it. Apparently they're used to it. Paula sat there at a church meeting one night for probably an hour and a half or so, and she barely made it, so had a hard time getting up. But they're used to it, so that's typical. Even when they do have benches or seats or something, it's nothing like the padded pews that we might have or padded chairs like this. Their buildings is wooden benches or no benches at all like you see here. And of course air conditioning is something that's not even heard of. And so and India of course is a hot country. So quite different from our situation. But anyway, that's the first aspect. First thing that they need. The second thing they need, of course, is written literature. The primary written literature that we might be familiar with here is the Voice of Truth International, which was mentioned just a moment ago. About 60,000 copies of this is printed every quarter and sent to about 60 different countries of the world. The cost of its subscription is $12 for 1 year's subscription, which would be 4 issues. Or if you as a congregation would like to get it, then you can pay $300 a year and get a box of 35 every quarter. And this is a good way to evangelize this community. You know, when you oftentimes talk to someone about a Bible study, if you try very much, you probably had this experience. You mention the word Bible study, and almost immediately you can see they start backing up, you know. They just not too interested in Bible studies. And they'll come up with all kinds of reasons why they don't need you. In other words, I can read the Bible for myself, or I get to go to church and I get studies there, and on we could go. But books many times will overcome that barrier. Because when they're able to get a book, most times they won't turn down a book, they'll be glad to receive it. And sometime in the privacy of their own home, then they begin to read. And of course, they read with an open mind then, because there is no pressure, no compulsion. They're doing it because they just want to. And they might begin to see something. And that might spark some interest. And they might come to you then asking questions. Of course, that's exactly what you want them to do. You can put these in doctor's offices, hospital waiting rooms, where people might be waiting at. Because when people are waiting, first thing to do is pick up something to read. And so it's a good way to get contacts you might receive any other way. We oftentimes undervalue and de-emphasize the value of literature. We print many other books, some of them on the table in the back. And on the average, about 10 people overseas will read a book during its lifetime. But to give you an illustration of how valuable books are here in America even, back several months ago, maybe in October, something like that of last year, we received a call from a man in Georgia. And someone had given him a copy of the Church of the Bible, which is this little orange book like this, and the Gospel of Christ. 2 very simple, basic study books about the Bible. And he could not contact the man who had given him the book for some reason or the other, but he contacted the office because the office number is in the front of every book that's printed. And he said, "Do you know of a Church of Christ in Monticello, Georgia?" Well, obviously he had no contact with the church because he didn't even know where one was located at. And so we contacted the church there in Monticello, and they contacted him. Now, I don't know whether he's now a Christian or not. I feel like there's a good chance that he is. But if he's a Christian now, it's because someone simply took the time to give him a couple of little books. And this is a country which normally think no one reads. No one's really interested in religious literature anymore. But they are. Now, you put that overseas, of course, and the situation, again, quite different. In other countries, literature is not even available most of the time. We often get letters from people crying for literature. I'm going to go and read a couple of sentences out of a couple of letters here, which I think illustrates the value of Christian literature and needs they recognize for it. This one is from Zimbabwe. He was asking for the Voice of Truth International. And he made this statement: "People here are really starved for Christian literature. You are our hope." Then another letter from the country of Botswana. And he made this statement. He said, "Brethren in the third world lack the talent, means, and equipment to produce your kind of Christian literature. And as such, we must depend very much on our American brethren." Now notice what these people are saying. Say, we need literature, we want literature, we know we have to have it, but we can't do it. Therefore, it's up to you. You see, we have something and we can do something that they cannot do for themselves. That is, give them the books that they need to give to their fellow man to teach them. And so that's what they've been trying to do for ever since they've been involved in mission work, is print all kinds of books and literature and pass them out just as much as they possibly can. Probably maybe half of the books that's printed even is given away overseas free because of generosity of Christians and congregations. Those books on the table, they are for sale, but whatever proceeds we get from them will be put back into work. Maybe we'll be able to send some others overseas. And so books are extremely important, and we're always looking for ways to send them overseas. Here's a picture of James Jones, who I mentioned just a moment ago, working Restoration Radio out of Nashville, Tennessee. They were sending a container to the country of Kenya, and he wanted to leave room for several volumes more than several volumes, thousands of volumes. The Voice of Truth and other sermon books and that sort of thing to be sent to 5 Bible colleges in that region. That gives you an idea of the number of books that we packed up right there. Probably that many more were sent directly to Nashville from our printer. And he came down not too long ago and picked up some more literature that we send, that we have there. So that gives you an idea of how so many volumes of our books go. 3,000 or maybe 4,000 volumes of the Voice of Truth were sent to a prison in Zambia back at the end of last year. So that just gives you an idea of where so many of the books go and what they're used for. Of course, in India, in addition to all the other books that we've talked about, we help them print Bible correspondence courses. We help them buy the Bibles and give them out. Here's an example of a Telugu, This is an example of a Telugu Bible. Joshua Gudum, that I mentioned a moment ago, he's in Kakinada. He has a great radio and TV ministry and Bible correspondence courses. He sends out about 1,000 Bibles like this every month. And this Bible costs about $2.25. So we could always in need of buy funds to buy more Bibles, because you ask them what do you need, most times they'll say something, well, I need more money for Bibles. So Bibles are available, but of course you have to buy them. And that's what they need more than anything else, is money to buy the Bibles, not the Bibles themselves. This is a picture of Joshua and all the literature that he sends out. He sends out, like I said, 1,000 Bibles a month. He also sends out a monthly magazine printed in Telugu, which is that blue magazine you see laying on the floor there. He also translates the Voice of Truth into Telugu, and he prints about 10,000 copies of that every quarter. That's those brown covers you see laying on the table there. So when I said about 60,000 copies of Voice of Truth, 20,000 of it is printed in India, into 2 main languages in India there. And the result of all this, of course, is churches. Here's a picture of one church that we had the privilege of attending a service there. This is really a church dedication or church building dedication service. The first service they had in that building, and Ricky Goodham was able to be there and cut the ribbon. And as you can see, the building is completely full right now, and you don't see anybody but women Well, because the men were sitting outside. There are men there, but they're outside. And so I talked with them very briefly about the work. And first thing I said was, I see one thing wrong with this building. It's not big enough. I'm sure maybe some people were there that more normal because it was the very first service, but still, I think it does illustrate the idea of how desperately they need it. Here's another building that was built, a church first service they had in this building again. This building was built entirely with Indian funds. No American money at all was involved in this. Quite different from buildings here, as you can see, but certainly adequate for Indian standards and something they're used to it. But you know, I could not speak their language, but I did not have to. I could see the pride in their eyes and their faces as they entered this building for the very first time and able to worship the God that they were trying to serve. You know, you can't buy that. You can't give that away. This church is now their church. It's not an American church in India, but it's their church. And that's what we want them to know, because indeed it is their church. It's not ours. It's their church. And we do not build church buildings. Generally, we do not support local preachers. I know a lot of congregations that do. You may do it yourself. I don't know. If you do, I would recommend that you rethink your philosophy. Normally, it doesn't work very well for several reasons. I don't have time to really get into it. But it causes jealousy and envy. It causes a lot of problems on down the road. And if you talk to many Indian preachers and brethren very long, then that's one of the first things you'll learn. Is they'll mention something about the problems they've encountered because of money is coming from America into the India and other places. So sometimes money causes more problems than what it solves. The third aspect of our work is that of radio and TV. Here's a picture of all the radio and TV speakers that's in India. We also have many speakers in radio programs in the Philippines. The one speaker there is not on the screen here. But we have more work that's going on besides just what mentioned here, but this is in India. So as I mentioned, we have 15 weekly programs in India and 8 weekly TV programs. The radio programs all are broadcast out of Sri Lanka, and that reaches pretty much that entire world over there. Even I can't understand how it reaches so far. And sometimes it even reaches the United States. I believe it was Joshua Goodham, but somebody some time ago, Betty asked him, how far does your program reach? And he said, well, basically it reaches the entire world, because I've received letters and responses from Indian listeners in America. I'm not sure how they're able to do that, maybe through the internet or somehow or another, but anyway, that gives you an idea of how far-reaching that indeed it is. But the result of all these radio and TV programs is tremendous. They receive over 100,000 responses per year, and that figure is really conservative. Joshua and Ricky Goodham that I mentioned a moment ago, they received close to that much just by himself. Now, certainly that is by far the largest work that we are involved with, but nevertheless, the others receive several thousand responses every month through their radio and TV programs. So the actual result is quite more than that, and of course, the result of all this is several thousand baptisms during the year. It also points out the need for written literature again, because for every response you get, you have to respond to it, and you can't respond to all of them by person. You have to send them something, which you send, of course, is a Bible correspondence course. And so the radio and TV and written literature, they all work together. If you try to have one without the other, then it wouldn't work very well. And so you can't just say, well, I'm just going to do written literature and I'm not going to worry about anything else. Well, where are you going to get people to send you written literature to? And you can't just do radio and TV, because if you get responses, unless you do something with them, you haven't accomplished anything. So it all goes together. And of course, along with that, then would be the local preachers and local people who will follow up on all these contacts. And the result would be several baptisms. This is a picture of a baptism in progress. This young lady is actually a blind woman. There's a lot of blind people in India for some reason. And so they do quite a bit of work with blind. They use Braille literature quite often. And so if you know of someone who reads Braille and needs some Braille literature, then let us know, and we'll try to send you a copy of it every once in a while. We can go to India and bring back a few copies of it, and be glad to help you with that. Here's a picture of Kakinada, of a program that we were involved in there, and 4 people were baptized on that day. we're able to witness that. In Winona, we're also involved in a World Mission Training School. That's the first, just starting. Going to start here about next week, as a matter of fact, the very first session. And the purpose of this is to give prospective missionaries some practical advice about what it means to be a missionary. Some very expensive mistakes have been made in mission work simply because people really were not prepared as to what to expect. And so they made the commitment to went to another country, but they realized very quickly it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and they could not last very long and had to come back. And all that money that took to send them over there was just wasted then. And so we want to avoid some of that. And so we got people coming in about 2 days out of every month. They'll keep doing whatever they're doing now to make a living. And we'll bring in some very experienced missionaries. People have been involved in the mission field full time for 20, maybe 30 years even. And they'll give them some practical advice in various countries about what it means to live and to do mission work. What we bring to the team, of course, is simply some experience. I've been preaching about 19 years now in various places, most time in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. My wife, who does most of the bookkeeping there in the office, and of course she had a degree in accounting, several years of office experience. We've also made several short-term mission trips before we became involved in this work, so we have at least an idea of what it is to do mission work and go overseas and travel. And so we are enjoying our work that we've started very much up to this point in time. We're working harder than ever in our life, I think. Getting paid less, I guess, but the way it works anyway. But we are glad that we're able to be involved with it and to see the good work that's being done. There's a picture of my wife in her office there in Winona. We work 5 days a week there in the building in Winona. Go overseas twice a year, about 6 weeks at a time. Of course, we're out every weekend then, on Sundays, visiting various churches, so we're busy just about all the time, as you might expect. Lewis and Bonnie Rushmore have also joined us, and he's from the northern. He's a Yankee, but we'll accept him. Don't judge him too much on that. He taught for 10 years at the West Virginia School of Preaching. He's also written several books, and he's the editor of the Gospel Gazette online, and also has some printing equipment that he brought down. This is a picture of some of the equipment that he brought down with us. And so he'll help us out a great deal in regards to some of the smaller printing projects. The larger printing projects like the books and the Voice of Truth and that sort of thing, we'll still have to do that somewhere else because it's just too big a volume for us to handle with the cheaper equipment that he has here. Our sponsoring congregation is the Strickland Church of Christ, which is just outside of Corinth. Of course, Liberty Church has been sponsoring the church for ever since they've been involved in mission work, pretty much, I guess. And they've continued to do that and oversee the bulk of the work. But each one of us who's involved in the work, then we each have our own sponsoring congregation, and ours is the Strickland Church, which is, like I said, just outside of Corinth. For the last 5 years before I became involved in this work, I was a preacher there at Brady Chapel Church, just outside of Corinth. So I suppose that congregation kind of the closest congregation to us, and a very good congregation, very faithful eldership. And so when we started getting involved in this work, we thought about who we're going to get to try to sponsor us, and both of us, my wife and I, immediately thought, well, we need to ask the Strickland Church. And so we did. And thankfully, they graciously continued to do that, and it's worked very well so far. Not long after they consented to take us on, then they came down to Winona to visit and look at the situation over for getting an idea of what's going on. And there's a picture of them in the house of J.C. and Betty. That's J.C. in that chair right there in the center there as they're visiting and talking with him. So we're glad to have this relationship with them. Our job and goal, of course, is simply spread the gospel to as many people as we possibly can. We're not going to do it all ourselves. We're not going to try to because we can't do it. But we want to, as I said, to give the native people the tools they need to do the job of evangelizing their own nations themselves. There's people in India who are Christians, many people who are Christians. They have the desire, they have the ability to spread the gospel. And we want to help them and other Christians in many other countries, wherever we might be able to. But in order for us to help them, then we need you to help us. And hopefully tonight, and we're here to acquaint you with more about the work that's been involved, that Martin has been involved with for so many years. We thank him personally for his great support. We hope that maybe at some point in time you're able to come on board and you're able to give us some support out of maybe you personally or as a congregation able to send us some money. And then certainly whatever we get will be, we promise to be used for the glory of God as best we know how, best we can at least. We have 2 or 3 minutes, I think. So does anybody have any questions that I did not mention very well or explain? It's probably something you probably usually say, you forgot this. But yes.
Last Sunday we had a speaker, $50 had permission free. And he informed us that there's more churches across the India than there is here.
That may well be true. Most of them are small. Most of them do not have elders. They do not have deacons. And so there's a lot of Christians in India. Probably just about as many Christians in India as are in the United States. Not hardly, but so there's a lot of Christians there. But they need more grounding and they need more time to grow and mature in the faith. We noticed this when we were there. This is the first trip back in the spring. We've been to India. We've been to other countries, but the first time to India. And we noticed very quickly that there was a difference between even what we might consider the more mature Christians in that congregation and the mature Christians here. Mature Christians here, they pretty much can take a verse of Scripture, and unless it's an extremely difficult verse, they can pretty much tell you what it means and explain it. But they would have a difficult time doing that. They're just not in their educational system or something or other. They're just not able to take a verse of Scripture and just read it and explain it to you. And also maybe to apply the principle that's true here and apply the same principle to another situation here. They would know the principle here, but they couldn't apply it over here. And so, I tried to get them to see that, do that. And so that's one aspect of the school of evangelism that I'm hoping to try to impart with them. In the fall, then, we'll try to have a series of lessons on the evidences of the Bible, that Bible is inspired of God, and how to read the Bible, how to understand it, and techniques to do that, and that sort of thing. But you're exactly right. Good comment. There's a lot of Christians in churches, but they still need more grounding and teaching. And that's where the great need is. Not to go out and knock on the door, so to speak, and us personally convert someone, but to encourage and preach the Christian story there. Anyone else? Okay, yeah, that might be a good idea too. Let me go back to the map here. And I think I can show you at least very quickly the map. It's a little small, of course, but there's India. Most of the Christians are right over there in that region, right in that little spot right there. There's one state called Andhra Pradesh, and that's where the vast majority of Christians, I'd say, any idea what percentage? Roughly, I'd say half. I don't know where it's right. I'm kind of on top of my head. But I imagine it's probably close to right, or in that one state. So, and that's where all the work has been done. Most of the preachers in the United States, and many of them have gone to India, if they go, most of the time they're going to go in that region. That's not really where they need to be going, because that's where most of the Christians are, where all the great Christians are, and the strongest churches are. Most of our work is done in other areas where the work is not nearly as strong as what it is there. And so there's still a great need for work in India. Not in that state, but in all the other states. In some states, the church is basically unknown. Even though, like I said, there's more church in India than the United States. Kind of like the United States. There are some states in the United States where their church is almost non-existent. And there are regions in India where the same is true.
Does Brother Bailey still have a work over there?
J.C. Bailey?
Yeah.
Well, he died.
Well, I knew he was dead, but I just thought he left.
I don't know. Yeah, Joshua Goodman was converted by him. So I'm sure a lot of his work is still going on by maybe a lot of other people.
I know back several years ago, Canadians was out there, one of them that could go over there and stay. Others, they go stay 6 months or 3 months, and they have to leave.
Right.
We did an extension, 3 more months, but there was no guarantee. And now, it's
10 years.
6 months at a time.
You can't stay. You
Yeah,
can go in and
all
out.
you have to do is just go out and
Okay, anyone else here? Well, better not rain yet, I think, before the clock is past time. I always, like I said, this fall I'll be going to Miramar to teach in that country. There's great work being done in that country. It's a hard country to work in. The government is very violent, very high-pitched, I guess you might say, on people that have to really be careful what they do. You've heard a lot about that on the news with the cyclone that happened there a few months ago. But that's Burma, yeah. But anyway, a lot of good work is being done in that country. Which shows that even though the government may be hostile to Christianity, the church can still grow and thrive in this situation, just like it did in the first century for that matter. One mention I did not mention is we also have a newsletter sign-up sheet on the table. If you would like to receive a copy of our newsletter, then please put your name and address on it, and we'll be glad to send it to you. So I think the bell just rang. I think I just heard. Was that the first one or second? Second, okay. So we will stop, and of course, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to ask us in the first. So